to Jonathan Taylor. Huge hole. He's at the 30. He's going to go. 10, 5, touchdown. Jonathan Taylor made a man miss the line of scrimmage and then runs it into Pater for a one-handed INT. Are you kidding me? Kenny Moore.
What a play by Nyheim Hines.
Horseshoe is back, baby. The horseshoe is back.
What's going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of the Bring the Juice Colts podcast. Derek Larger, Cody Felger joining you as always. And today we're going to continue talking and breaking down the position groups. We've been talking about all of the offense recently, and we're going to break down the last group of the offense before we move to the defense, and that involves the offensive line. And this is a fun group to talk about because as Colts fans, we know the offensive line under Chris Ballard has quickly become one of, if not the best offensive line group in the NFL. By most people, by default, they honestly think the Colts is the best one when you look at it from the totality of everything. So we're going to save the left tackle spot here, Cody, until last because we'll talk about that just kind of on the back end of this. But let's kind of start from the right side and move over to the left side here. We'll talk about each of the starting five, and then we'll talk about the depth in total. So let's start with Braden Smith here. Braden Smith, drafted in 2018, same draft as Darius Leonard and Quenton Nelson. You know, all of those two guys who are widely renowned as some of the best players at their position in general, and it helped the Colts quickly become having one of the greatest drafts that we've ever seen in 2018. And now with the emergence of a Braden Smith, that's now making that argument even more comparable. So what's your opinions on Braden Smith and how good he's become?
Oh, underrated, unbelievably underrated. I mean, my goodness, it's so overshadowed by those first two picks that you look and you say, man, Braden Smith is quietly, I would say last year played like a top 5 offensive tackle in the league. I mean, he didn't allow a sack. He was fantastic in the run game. He's continuing to ascend every year. He's getting better as a player. So, yeah, Braden Smith, what can you say about him, man? He's just been, it's kind of a crazy story to look at Braden Smith from when he was drafted as a rookie out of Auburn in 2018 in that second round to where he is now. Because if you remember, he was drafted to play guard, right? A lot of people said he's going to be a guard. Like the Colts drafted 2 guards in the first 2 rounds. And Chris Ballard even has admitted he thought he was a guard. So I don't know if you remember all the way back in 2018, but I remember this well because I was actually at this game down in New England. Matt Slauson gets hurt. Braden Smith has to go in at right tackle. Mark Glowinski goes in at right guard. And then the rest is history. They haven't relinquished those ever since. And Braden Smith, just a credit to him, never really played tackle in college. And just how good he's been, it's been one of the better stories on the Colts the last couple of years because this guy – if you look up a definition of underrated in the dictionary, Braden Smith's picture should be right there, man. He is so underrated in everything that he does. He's still very young. He still can get better, which is crazy to think about. And he's certainly going to earn that big payday that he's going to get here very soon because he is absolutely an ascending player on this Colts offense.
Yeah, I mean, we were saying it at the end of the year. They were breaking down all the all-pros. Braden Smith, the only tackle in the NFL that did not allow a sack after a certain point of snaps that were required, and yet didn't even get considered for an all-pro. Not a Pro Bowl, not an all-pro, not a second-team all-pro, none of that crap. Which is ridiculous that a tackle who had the best season that a tackle can possibly have in all the NFL did not get any recognition. This guy really does get overshadowed by all of the rest of the guys on the offensive line. And, you said it, not allowing a sack, and it's ascended every year since he's been in this league. And ironically enough, he's been facing the best competition on his side more often than not. When he got drafted, everyone said, oh, well, let's go after Braden Smith. He's the youngest. He's the least experienced. He's not as great as Anthony Costanzo. And yet, even with still all the competition, Braden Smith was still a top, let's say, 10 to 15 tackle in the league when you look at it right there at the midway point, which honestly was not that bad. We thought he was really good. but then to just see where he's at now. And, you said it, he's going to get a payday here at some point soon because, you got a guy like that. You got to keep him around. And, he's such a humble guy too, which is great because he was asked about that recently. He's like, what's your feeling about the contracts, man? I mean, your contract extension's coming up. I mean, you going to ask for a big one? And he said, that's my agent's job. I'll let my agent take care of that. I'm just going to go out and play football. I love that. And he's also just another human being. If anyone follows him on Twitter, he's posting gardening tips. He's posting fish pictures. Like, I mean, the guy just is like, he seems like just a down-to-earth kind of guy, which is great because, a lot of guys don't do that on Twitter, kind of show their lives outside of football. But, he really does. He's kind of just does that to kind of help a few people out on Twitter. And that's why he became so popular on Twitter as soon as he got on because, apparently a lot of people like fishing and gardening advice. So, but yeah, he's a great player. I can't wait to see him thrive in this system for many more years, along with some of these other guys. And we'll now talk about the right guard, the second oldest guy on the roster. And Cody, you've had some mixed feelings. I love to bring it up every time we talk about this guy. Every time we talk about this guy, I love to bring up the fact that, Cody used to have a lot of mixed feelings about Mark Glowinski. Used to really hate Mark Glowinski a couple years back, but I think you've started to come around a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. Oh my goodness. My goodness, like it's crazy how much you remind me. And I don't forget. Don't worry. I don't forget. Every time I hear the name, I'm like, Derek's going to say something. And it never fails. But yeah, no, Mark Glowinski, good player. Really good player. Very undershadowed, I guess, from a lot of these other guys. Like when we'll talk about the other guys as well. But he's solidly been a really nice find by Chris Ballard, former 4th-round pick, if you remember. He's just been really solid at right guard. And he just, like I mentioned with Braden Smith, he's one of those guys that, you didn't expect him to do what he's done, and he's done a very good job at being the right guard for the Colts. And, I feel like he's a guy that obviously you feel like maybe you can replace him down the line because he's getting a little bit older. He's still a pretty good player. And I feel like he's still got a lot left as well because I believe he's 29 or something like that. So he's a little bit older, but we know the shelf life of offensive linemen. It can be a little bit longer, probably one of the more longer in the league compared to some of these other guys. So Mark Glowinski has been a really solid guy. And it's crazy. We talked about it, Derek, before in a podcast. Like at one point, that offensive line on the right side was outperforming the left side of the offensive line, which is crazy. Yes. And that's just a credit to both those guys, including Mark Glowinski, how good he played. I think he had a nice bounce back season from 2019. And I like to see that from him. And really, you don't have to worry about that right side for a while. His contract's coming up. We'll see, obviously, what the Colts do there if they feel like they can run it back with him because he's been a really good player for them, or if they want to upgrade a little bit, I think they can do that too. But, you can certainly do a lot worse than a Mark Glowinski at this point. So, yeah, I think he's a really solid player. An average to above average guard, I think, is really a good place to place him right now.
Yeah, I mean, you said it, 29 years old. He just turned 29 in May. So he still has a lot of years ahead of him if he stays healthy. And that's really not been an issue for him because, I mean, he's had some nagging injuries throughout the years, but nothing that's really kept him out of a full season. So, has been relatively healthy. In my opinion, from this last year was an above average guard. So, and you and I have kind of, I hate bringing it up, but I kind of just say it a lot because it makes a lot of sense. When you talk about your right guard and saying that your above average right guard is the worst spot on your offensive line, or at least what people deem as the worst spot on the offensive line, you're doing really damn good when you got an above average player and he's your weakest link. And like you said, he took a ginormous step from 2019 to 2020. Really struggled in the passing game a lot, and had a lot of penalties committed against him. But this last year, the first couple weeks, him and Braden were the part of the offensive line. They were better than Quenton Nelson, Ryan Kelly, and Anthony Costanzo all together. They were moving people. They were pass blocking very efficiently. it was really great to see. And I can't wait to see what happens there. I hope they can still keep him around. I mean, 30, when you get to be 30, I don't know. I guess it's not that terrible because, a lot of people in free agency go for offensive linemen that are a little older if they know that they're still comparable. So I think that he might have a decent market if people decide they want to bring him in. I mean, he would be a good guard anywhere. So we'll see how that turns out. But now we start getting into the prime cut of this offensive line, starting here in the very middle. And that is Ryan Kelly, former first-round pick for the Indianapolis Colts in 2016. Been here a couple more years than some of the other guys, the big-name ones. But Ryan Kelly struggled with some injuries early in his career, was kept out of the majority of, I think it was the 2018 season.
I think it was 2017. I think it was number 2, sophomore year. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. I can't remember exactly which years it was, but, the last couple years has been a lot better, hasn't had as many injuries. And that's been great because it's been able to keep him on the field and it's been able to really help this offensive line. And I think he's gotten a little help from Big Q and getting his mojo back because when you drafted him in 2016, one of the few picks that Ryan Grigson ever made that actually turned out to be a really good pick. Mm-hmm. And, he was really known at Alabama for being nasty, being the guy that moves people around, very technically sound. And, I ratted on him quite a few times early in the year. He was dealing with some lingering injuries and it really seemed to be bothering him and his performance. But, when the offensive line really took off again, Ryan Kelly has really just been a phenomenal center, in my opinion, a top 3 center in the league. What's your thoughts on Ryan Kelly?
Yeah, I think top 3 center for sure. It's been really cool to see his kind of growth too from rookie season, really playing alongside nobody. Like it's crazy to think now he's kind of the veteran at that offensive line. Like he's been around the longest on the Indianapolis Colts of anybody on this offensive line. And he's not really that old. So, but yeah, he's been really, really solid. He's been a really good draft pick. I'm crazy to say, but yeah, I've loved what I've seen from Ryan Kelly, and he's been at every part. I think if you go back and you redraft, you take him again every time because he's been so good at center for the Indianapolis Colts. And, he's just such a good leader on that offensive line. And it's been cool to see him kind of become more of that vocal leader, it seems like, on that offensive line. And really take control, really get guys where they need to go, really, call out things when he sees it. It's been really cool to see Ryan Kelly, and also, like you mentioned, stay more healthy these last couple of years. So, yeah, I think he definitely deserved that contract extension that he got, and I'm excited to see the future with Ryan Kelly at center because I think they got a really good one in Ryan Kelly.
All right, well, let's go to the best cut of the offensive line here, and it is a name that everyone knows, and that is Quenton Nelson, Big Q, the left guard. Most people, I would say most logical people, would say that Quenton Nelson is probably the best offensive lineman in the game currently. When you look at it from all perspectives, probably I would say 90% of the NFL fan bases and other people would say he's a top 5 offensive lineman. No questions asked. I mean, Big Q, what isn't there to love about Big Q? I'm just going to let you go ahead and ramble here for a few minutes, and I'll just piggyback off what you say. But what's the opinion here on Big Q?
Like you said, what's there not to like about him? He's got the size. He's nasty. He's a tone setter for this offensive line. My goodness, you mentioned how much he's helped Ryan Kelly. How much he helped Anthony Costanzo get to the best he's ever played. We're even having conversations, Derek, about the Big Q effect, we're calling it, right?
Yes.
How it could have an effect on anybody at left tackle, anybody beside him on this offensive line, really anybody on the offensive line. He has set a tone. It speaks for itself. 2017, the Indianapolis Colts allowed the most sacks in the league. In 2018, only a year later, Quenton Nelson's rookie year, they were one of the top teams. I think they were the top team in sacks allowed.
Yeah.
That's the big Q effect right there. That's how much of an impact. People say, oh, left guards don't have an impact. That's bull crap. Quenton Nelson has had so much impact on this offensive line. It's crazy to think about that there were actually people who are making arguments you don't take a guard at 6. Isn't that crazy to think about?
Look it away now.
Quenton Nelson is a generational type offensive lineman, man. And he's still in his prime, right? He's still getting into his prime right now. He can still get better at offensive guard, which is wild to think about. I mean, people were even saying when he was drafted, future Hall of Famer. And now we see why people were saying that. This dude lays people's out. I mean, he's people like associate pancakes with Quenton Nelson. That's the type of player. He's earned that kind of reputation. He's one of the only offensive linemen I've ever heard of that actually has a highlight tape.
So it doesn't happen very often.
It doesn't. And I think he is such a rare player. And the fact that the Colts were able, I still marvel at what Ballard was able to do in 2018. Trade out of 3, get more second-round picks, and also still draft Big Q at 6. Absolutely insane.
Yeah, it was absolutely insane. You're right. I mean, this man has had a pancake special on the NFL Network. They even made a highlight clip and a song after him. I mean, it's just like, I mean, what more can you say? I mean, this guy's a three-time All-Pro already in his first 3 seasons in the NFL. Only person that ever did that in the first 3 seasons outside of Big Q was Barry Sanders. Barry Sanders is the only other player in the history of the NFL in their first 3 seasons to be a first-team All-Pro every time. Now, granted, Darius Leonard should have been first-team All-Pro in 2019 when he missed 4 games due to injury. Should have been at that point, but nevertheless, I mean, that's a topic for another day. But, again, you said it, just how many people said you can't draft a guard at 6? It's just not logical. But yet, I mean, Brian Baldinger, he'll tell you every time. He said he's the second best player in the draft outside of Saquon Barkley. I mean, why would you not draft a guy there if you need him at that spot? If you definitely need a guard, and we knew the Colts absolutely needed a guard, they needed help anywhere they could get it, and you get the best offensive lineman in the draft. That was exactly why you did it. And I don't know if they truly felt his impact was going to help the team so much in the way it did, because like you said, he was so different in a way he approached the game. I felt like a lot of times that I wouldn't necessarily say the team was lacking the motivation or was just going through the steps, but it just really felt like they needed something to pick them up and say, where's the guy that's going to set the tone? And like you said, Big Q absolutely did that. And it's phenomenal to see what he's done with this offensive line. Immediately when he came in as a rookie, emerged himself as one of the best offensive linemen in football and turned this offensive line completely around. And, it helped that Andrew Luck came back in 2018. It helped that he was obviously a huge step over Jacoby Brissett in terms of pocket presence. So that certainly helped. But obviously, Big Q was the biggest reason as to why that changed.
Yep.
All right, let's move to left tackle here. No longer Anthony Costanzo, but it is Cody's favorite free agent move so far this offseason, and that was Eric Fisher, former number 1 overall pick from 2013, former Kansas City Chief. I mean, he's kind of been a lot like what a bunch of these guys have been, where he came into the league, wasn't terrible, wasn't bad, but he certainly wasn't great, certainly wasn't as good as he is now, but over the years has really started to get better and better, has found a better situation with Kansas City, and then he now goes to a system here in Indianapolis where he feels like he's going to be next to a bunch of other great guys and protecting a good quarterback as well. So what's your thoughts here on Eric Fisher and what he can do to replace Anthony Costanzo?
Yeah, Eric Fisher, I would say at this point, he was a better player last year than Anthony Costanzo. So I feel like he's got a lot more left in the tank too. I believe he's 30. He's around 30. There. So he's 30. So he's still got a lot of life left potentially. Obviously, it all hinges on that Achilles injury. Can he get back to fully form? But if he can, man, if he can fully get back, I mean, my goodness, this guy was one of the best offensive tackles in the league. I mean, the Colts could have, easily could have the best offensive line if he can get back to the form that we know he can get to. I mean, I think that's the reason, Derek, why we were kind of looking at some free agent offensive tackles. Eric Fisher was my clear-cut number one because he was so much better than any of these other guys at offensive tackle. I mean, and there's no, position you have to switch to, right tackle to left tackle or anything like that. He's a left tackle. He's been a left tackle, I think, ever since, if I'm not mistaken. I think he's played left tackle. Don't quote me on that because maybe I feel like maybe
he's been the left tackle ever since being in the NFL. I mean, he's stayed at that spot. Yeah,
gotcha. Yeah, I thought maybe he had right tackle experience at one point, but maybe not. But anyway, yeah. The point is here, he's been a left tackle for a majority of his career here, so it's a very natural fit. It was actually amazing how logical this signing made here. Because now your offensive line is potentially solidified for the next couple of years. The Colts have even said, if he gets back to form, we want to re-sign him to a decently long contract. So, I mean, the Colts look like they have their offensive line potentially set, especially on that left side for the next couple of years. So, Eric Fisher, man, former number one overall pick. I mean, Quenton Nelson, obviously, we know what he is. I mean, the Colts could have the most talented from center to left tackle, most talented group in the NFL if Eric Fisher can get back to form.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a great player here and, hoping to continue to be a force to be reckoned with. Coming back from the injury, we'll have to see when eventually he comes back. But we have a feeling that being next to Big Q, will certainly help him in regards to getting even better than what we think he already can be. All right, so let's talk about the depth of this offensive line here. If we were talking about this, I would say even 4 months ago, Cody, then you and I both would have agreed that, depth of offensive line was a tremendous, tremendous concern for us because Ballard even mentioned it that, the offensive line depth really hurt us last year because, a bunch of guys got hurt and they really didn't have a lot of options to really help each other out. But Ballard took a great initiative to fixing that now. So now you have Sam Tevy, who you brought in from the Chargers to be the left tackle potentially until Eric Fisher gets back. You brought in a guy like Julian Davenport to help out with that spot. You brought in Chris Reed, guard from the Panthers last year, who honestly was a really good guard, but, just didn't want to stick around. And, we have made the argument that if, we've kind of made that thing where we said that if Glowinski decided to end up leaving, we might just end up putting Chris Reed at that right guard spot. That's how important you think he is and how good he is. And then the Colts drafted Danny Pinter in the 5th round of the 2020 draft. He played quite a bit last year for a couple snaps. He did really well in his time that he was there. They brought in a bunch of collection of these different guys here. So now if somebody goes down, you feel a lot more comfortable knowing that it may not be as good as the original group is. Of course not, but you feel a little more comfortable knowing that you have some guys that can come in. Performance won't drop off so bad where we saw from last year when Costanzo and Braden Smith went down and you see the difference in the pressures and everything else. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about the offensive line depth in general for this whole group here?
Yeah, I feel so much better about this group, like you mentioned, than even, last year for sure. But really ever since, the Colts have built this offensive line, this is the best I felt about. Yes, obviously they're starters, but they're backups as well. I mean, you have guys that can basically fill in anywhere. You have Danny Pinter who can play center and guard. You have Chris Reed that we mentioned can play some guard for you. You have Sam Tevy who can play left tackle. And, you have Will Fries, another guy that the Colts drafted this year that can play a little bit of everything too. You brought back Joey Hunt, who played some snaps at guard last year too. So you feel really, really good about your offensive line depth. Like you feel like there's really if a guy goes out, obviously you want all 5 of your starters to be healthy for the entire year. But in reality, somebody's going to get banged up. You feel really good about whoever goes in there is going to do a really nice job. And you're not going to really miss a whole lot, right? You're not going to miss a giant. It's not going to be what the drop-off was last year when Costanzo or Braden Smith went down and you have Raven Clark and Chaz Green in there. It's going to be a lot more competent at the backups. And I think that is so big for what you want to do, and such an underrated thing that Ballard did this offseason that I think he really learned from 2020. And so overall, very excited for this group. I feel like this offensive line backups, they're just going to continue to ascend and be better. And if you can have really 6, 7, 8, really solid offensive linemen that can really help out, and 3 or 4 guys that can really help out from a depth standpoint, I mean, you feel really good about where you're going to go, especially with that 17th game. We know how much, 16 games already impacted people, but playing now a 17th game, I think offensive line depth especially is more important even now. So overall, yeah, this depth, man, is crazy how much better it is than last year.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this one, guys. Let us know in the comments how you feel about this offensive line group. Let us know what you think of the depth of it. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If you guys made it this far into the video, make sure to hit that notification bell button to let you know whenever we upload another video or go live. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And as always, go Colts.